Welcome to Real Estate Agents Are Obsolete, presented by FSBO Profit Lab. My name is Nicholas McDonald. In the introduction video, I briefly made my case why real estate agents are obsolete. In this video, I'll provide the data behind the points I made in that video. Here's what we'll cover today. I'll start by explaining what the federal government doesn't want you to know about inflation, capital gains, and your home's true value in purchasing dollar terms. You'll see why you may need to save every dollar when selling your home, because even if you have a gain in your home's value, your purchasing power may actually be a loss. In fact, you may be paying capital gains on something that should rightly be considered a loss. And I'll show you 3 examples that will prove my point. I'll then share with you the gap between how home buyers shop for homes and how real estate agents market. I'll then explain how technology has shattered the real estate broker's monopoly and how sellers now have access to the same marketing channels and technology brokers have. By the end, you'll be asking yourself, am I getting what I'm paying for from a real estate agent? And why am I paying all that commission for something I can easily do myself? In the U.S., the median home price is $176,700. And with a 6% agent commission, the agent chips $10,600 off the top of the sale, leaving the seller with a net of $166,000 before any closing fees or concessions. Today's real estate market is volatile. The Standard & Poor's Case-Shiller Home Price Index graph show the ups and downs of the market since 1988. As you can see, for every good time, there follows a bad time. Given the cyclical nature of the housing market, your gain or loss is dependent upon when you sell your home. Let's take a couple of periods from the graph and compare. We'll do a simple sold return on investment analysis. If you purchased your home in 1991 at the start of the longest period of price growth, then sold at the top of the market in 2006, you have seen a 16% appreciation for that period. Compared to other parts of the graph, it looks like a good time to own a home, and relatively speaking it was. But when one compares housing to other investments, such as certificates of deposit during that period, we see that housing's average annual 1% appreciation is dwarfed by the CD's average 4.23% interest rate. If you purchased your home in 2005, at the end of the same period of appreciation, just before the economy spiraled into the Great Recession, and then sold at the depths of the recession, you'd have lost 30% of the value of your home. If you purchased your home in 1991, as the economy emerged from the late 1980s, early 1990s recession, then sold it in mid-2015, you would have been rewarded for your staying power with a 6% appreciation. So let's quickly review ROI. Now, most ROIs are calculated on an annual basis. Some are monthly. In the previous analysis, we're discussing sold ROI. Here's how to look at ROI, or return on investment. If your home's market price is what you paid for it, you are breaking even. If its market price exceeds your purchase price, you have a positive ROI and you made money. If you sold your home for less than you paid for it, you received a negative ROI, or you lost money. ROI is actually a ratio. Think of ROI as a percentage increase over a period of time, such as a year or after a sale. For example, 12% ROI. Pretty simple, right? In the graph above, we saw narrow and wide swings in the housing economy. In many respects, the wide swings were the result of government and central bank involvement. The Federal Reserve is our nation's central bank. It's the entity that creates money. It used to be that money or notes were receipts for gold or silver, but that's not the case anymore. The Federal Reserve's stated goal is 2% inflation. Since the economy is so large and complicated, the Fed usually reacts too early or too late, or too severely or too weakly. Their track record is abysmal. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that they cause one bubble after another as they attempt to achieve their mandate. If housing swing in prices result from supply and demand, it's usually because of local or regional supply and demand issues, too much or too little housing. Now, if the swing is national, it may be an indication of a larger cycle. However, in today's centrally controlled economy, that's likely caused by the central bank or the government's intervention. The Fed manages the economy by adding or removing money supply. The federal government does this by tax policy and regulation. Price appreciation is often wrongly called inflation. In fact, most price appreciation is caused by supply and demand as the market balances supply, demand, and the price of something. If the price of, say, homes is too low, fewer are built because no one would intentionally lose money building homes. When the price is too high, more and more contractors enter the market until excess homes drive the price down. That's supply and demand. Monetary inflation is too many dollars in circulation, better known as money printing. Unlike real estate, there is often more money going into circulation, and supply and demand principles still apply, so the more of something, the less it's worth. To review, price appreciation is not inflation. By the way, the price of money is the value you can purchase with a dollar. Just like housing, supply and demand influences the value of money. However, the Fed determines the supply of money. So, why am I discussing the Fed and inflation? In a minute, I'll show you how it impacts your purchasing power. I also want you to understand that you are being taxed on inflation, but that will come later. Let's look at historical inflation first. Inflation for the last 101 years averaged 2.93%. That's according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. In the decade the Fed was created, inflation averaged 9.8%. In the 1930s, the U.S. experienced deflation, and recently, in the 1970s and 80s, we saw 5.82 and 7.25% inflation, respectively. Today, one 1913 dollar is worth only 4 cents in purchasing power. Another way to look at it, it would take $24.10 of today's dollars to buy one 1913 dollar. Because it's more relevant to us living today, this graph shows the effects of inflation since 1980 and before 1980. That is, it shows purchasing power in a 1980 dollar. What does this mean? Let's look at an example. If you could buy a hamburger for $1 in 1980, it would cost you $2.90 in 2015. That's a loss of $1.90 or 66% in 35 years. Let's look at the purchasing power given the Fed's inflation goal. If you sold your home for what you paid for it, this would be your purchasing power after your 10, 20, or 30-year mortgage is paid off. If you sold your home without any appreciation, you could only buy about one half of your home back. If inflation approached the 101-year average, you'd only be able to buy the living room of your home. If we're talking hamburgers, you'd only be able to buy one bite. Let's look at that same graph we saw earlier. This tells you the price of the average home from 1988 until 2014. Except for that 15-year period from 1991 to 2005, home prices have been extremely volatile. Since the Great Recession, we've oscillated between good and bad years fairly regularly. Over the last 27 years, because of government policy manipulation through regulation, deregulation, and re-regulation, our federal politicians, greedy bankers, and the Federal Reserve has sprouted our economy from boom to bust and back again, time and time again. Remember that 16% gain we saw earlier? Let's look at the effects of inflation on most of Americans' largest investment. If you bought a home at the bottom of the late 1980s, early 90s recession and sold at the top in 2006, your 16% gain would have been a 32% loss in purchasing power after the effects of inflation are calculated. What if you were unfortunate to buy a home at the top of the market before the Great Recession and then sold at the depths of the recession? Your loss would be 30%. If you included inflation, your real ROI loss would be 39%. What if you wrote out the ups and downs of the market and sold today? Your 6% gain would have been a real ROI loss of 37%. Now, these numbers are average U.S. national figures. Some areas like California's Bay Area or New York City, you're doing a lot better than the average. But if you owned a home in the Rust Belt areas of Ohio or Pennsylvania, supply and demand outstrip demand, and you can hardly give your home away. So why did I drag you through all this? For two reasons. First, I wanted you to see the effects of inflation. Even if you sold your home for a gain, in many instances, inflation ate more of the profit than you received or more of the profit than you expected. Moreover, that profit or capital gains was taxed by the U.S. government if you didn't roll over the gains to your next home. And there's no deduction for inflation loss on your taxes. Second, if you took all the risks to the market's ups and downs, mostly caused by the Fed and government intervention, then threw in supply and demand pressure, owning a home can be an extremely risky bet, at least from an investment perspective. So, why are real estate agents getting so well rewarded? Primarily because they're providing a service. But given the risks and rewards, why give so much away to a real estate agent? Couldn't you use the 5 to 7% commission? Let's look at that typical home again. That 6% commission gathers out $10,600 from your profit, or heaven forbid, your loss. After expenses, that $176,700 becomes $160,000 to $163,000, and that's $13,000 to $16,000 into someone else's pocket when it's all said and done. Okay, let's look at the agent and the typical buyer and seller. The National Association of Realtors survey gives us some good insight into the minds of the real estate market. Let's look at the seller's satisfaction with the process. It looks like 88% of the sellers are very or somewhat satisfied with their agent, with 12% overall dissatisfied. Not too bad, right? Now, let's look at it again from another perspective. It looks like just under 50% of the sellers want something more. Who sells homes? 88% are sold by agents and 10% sold by owners. After subtractions and additions, 88% are still sold by agents and now 9% are sold by owners. What do sellers want from their agent? It's pretty much to find a buyer primarily, and secondly, help them do it in a certain time and do a few nicks and knacks. I really thought that marketing and finding buyers would be a lot higher than 37%. What do agents bring to the game? First, they bring knowledge about what sells a home. Then, they should know the direction of the market and the buyer's taste. Though not at the top of the list for sellers, they help you set your asking price. And more than anything, they better have access to the multiple listing service, their greatest asset. By virtue of their license, they are trained to comply with real estate laws and regulations. And finally, they help with contingencies, negotiations, and closing tasks. Let's look at marketing. What do agents and buyers do? 89% of the agents use the multiple listing service, which is odd since they all should have this going on. 66% use yard signs, and 47% use open houses. Then a sizable number use low ROI marketing, shown here in yellow. At the bottom, we see few use video and social marketing. Now the buyers. 88% of them use the internet, and 80% of them use it frequently to look for a home to buy. 87% still go to agents. Now, 43% use the internet to find the home they eventually purchased, and 33% report agents help them find the home they eventually purchased. If you ask me, for the commission split, I think the buyers aren't getting what they're paying for. Scratch that. The seller isn't getting what they're paying for, since the seller usually pays the buyer's commission. And you can see the others. Now, this next thing is interesting. Though 66% of the agents use yard signs, only 9% of the buyers used it. I wonder if the sign really is the agent's bulletin board, vice marketing your home. Just saying. 13% use newspapers, though only 1% of the buyers used it to find their home. Now, the green lines surround the best ROI, and the dashed green lines show just how far behind most agents are. In fact, it's where most sellers and agents should be if they want to be found. To be fair, though, the MLS is online and it's the agent's best lead generator for sellers. But essentially, there's very little other online activities reported in the survey. I thought it would be instructive to show where most owner-sellers advertise. Yard signs, newspapers, and hope seem to be their best strategy. So, do you need video? Despite the low reporting by agents and buyers, in a word, yes. In a study published by Cisco, a leading U.S.-based technology company, they reported that consumer internet video traffic will be 80% of all consumer internet traffic in 2019. That's up from 64% in 2014. So it's obvious. Video is what customers are expecting, and it will be those that serve the market that will be ahead of the competition. Let's look more at buyers' behavior. 43% of buyers first looked online when they began their home search, and then 76% of them drove by the property. It's good to have a sign, I guess. The 64% actually walked through the home after seeing it online. What did buyers value online? Make a note of this. Photos and detailed information took 83 and 79%, with interactive maps coming in third and neighborhood information coming in at fifth place. The virtual tour and video came in at fourth and sixth, but combined, they would have come in as third place, which I think supports Cisco's research, because virtual tours and video are essentially moving video. It's like we're all cats and we're attracted to something moving. How did the real estate business used to be? Information was hard to find, and agents virtually had a monopoly. The multiple listing service used to be a paper catalog, which only agents had. An agent's network and connections were essential, and to be anyone, agents had to be in newspaper advertising and in those little shopper magazines. So, what's wrong with real estate agents? I'm going to give it to you straight. They cost too much. A listing agent's commission can be ridiculously high, and it takes 5 to 10 years of appreciation to cover commissions if you can time the market. You have all the risks, and agents take a lot of the profits. So, do you really need an agent? As we saw, too many agents aren't marketing where buyers are. Remember, 88% of buyers use the internet. An agent's main tool is the MLS, something you can easily access without an agent anymore. Today, you can use online tools and information to price your home. Just a little warning here though. They are automated and based solely on data without regard to recent competition, market pricing trends up or down, details of the home, and are easily affected by foreclosure sales. Plus, today, you can do almost anything an agent can do. The real estate broker's monopoly is more of a metaphor than a fact anymore. Zillow, Trula, and the MLS and other channels are open to anyone. Buyers are connected socially with Facebook, Twitter, and other sites. And the bottom line is this: social is big, technology is ubiquitous, and information is readily available. So, what's holding you back? Does today's market seem too techy and complicated? What about online advertising? Does assessing the best advertising channels seem like a lot of work? Do you know how to price your home to the market? Can you make the necessary fixes to your home to get the best asking price? Then there's the negotiations and the paperwork to close the deal. No problem. Here's what you need to succeed: awareness and preparation. Today's world has made agents replaceable. There's more to selling your home than a yard sign, and you need knowledge, a system. You need to know what and the how. Millennials and other buyers are tech savvy, so you need to be tech savvy. Your home needs to be prepared right, it has to be priced correctly, and you need a strategy and tactics for today, not yesterday. So essentially, technology and information has made real estate agents obsolete, because an informed for sale by owner can easily outperform and outsell most agents. Are you getting what you're paying for from your agent? Is saving $8,000 to $9,000 worth learning how to sell by owner and then acting on what you learned? If you answered yes to both of these questions, then you're just the type to take control of your next home sale and save big time on commissions. Can you sell your home without a listing agent? The answer is obvious. We covered a lot today, so let's briefly review. We began by showing you the median U.S. home price and the amount of agent commissions for this typical home. We discussed how volatile the housing market is and was, and showed you the cyclical nature of home prices over the last 27 years as shown in the graph. We defined ROI, return on investment, and explained the difference between price appreciation and inflation, or more succinctly, monetary inflation. We showed you the effects of inflation since America switched to a central bank, the Fed, and how that affects your ROI. We mentioned that we likely pay more capital gains taxes on inflation than actual price appreciation. From the data, we see that there's large financial risk to owning a home as a result of Fed and government action, not the free market supply and demand actions. We then moved to data analysis as we discussed the NAR survey. We hit on agent satisfaction, how buyers searched for a home, action buyers took when they found a home they wanted. We discussed how the housing ecosystem has changed vis-a-vis how technology has leveled the playing field, how the broker's monopoly is gone. We then touched a little more on the typical U.S. home, commissions, and how much others are getting from your home sale. We summarized what's wrong with real estate agents and ended by outlining what we need to know and do to sell your home yourself. As we saw today, the real estate market is volatile and can be a risky bet, especially if we consider the effects of inflation and your real ROI. The real estate agent, though valuable for some sellers, really isn't necessary in today's online world where you have most information and marketing channels real estate agents had only a few years ago, especially when we consider how agents market and how buyers consume information and make buying decisions. Well, that's it for Real Estate Agents Are Obsolete.